Coming up on Network Africa. A former insurance company director is named Malawi's new finance minister a day after new President Lazarus Chakwera is sworn in. Burundi's president unveils a new cabinet that includes 2 officials under US and EU sanctions. Plus, South African firm manufactures coronavirus test kits that promises rapid results to aid the country's COVID-19 fight. Thank you for joining us this hour. Welcome. I'm Layo Adegoke. We begin the program this week with stories and happenings that made headlines over the weekend.
On Saturday, following mediation by the African Union, Egypt, Ethiopia and Sudan agreed to broker a deal to fill the giant Blue Nile Dam in 2 to 3 weeks to end a decade-long dispute over water supplies. Tortuous negotiations over the years have left the two nations and their neighbor Sudan short of an agreement to regulate how Ethiopia will operate the dam and fill its reservoir, while protecting Egypt's scarce water supplies from the Nile River. Ethiopia's water minister, Seleshi Bekele, said on Saturday that consensus had been reached to finalize a deal within 2 to 3 weeks, a day after leaders from the 3 countries and South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, who chairs the African Union, held an online summit. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is being built about 15 kilometers from the border with Sudan on the Blue Nile, the source of most of the Nile's waters. Still on Saturday, Malawi's opposition leader Lazarus Chakwera was declared the winner of a rerun presidential election, a dramatic reversal of incumbent Peter Mutharika's discredited win 13 months earlier. The Electoral Commission said the 65-year-old secured the required majority with 58.57% of the vote on Tuesday, June the 23rd, beating Mutharika. Chakwera won election to a 5-year term as president of a nation of 18 million people.
The Commission declares that Lazarus Chakwera, the candidate who has attained 58.57% of the votes, has attained the requisite majority of the electorate as appearing in the second schedule and is duly elected as President of the Republic of Malawi.
In power since 2014, Mutharika must now either challenge the result in court or step aside. The vote was regarded by analysts as a test of the ability of African courts to tackle ballot fraud and restrain presidential power. It is also viewed as a triumph for democracy in Africa.
Well, we're still in Malawi, where the new president has appointed a former insurance company director, Felix Mlulusu, as the new finance minister. In a government statement issued on Monday, 5 other ministerial positions and 3 senior civil servants have also been named. This comes a day after President Lazarus Chakwera was sworn in following last week's rerun election in which he unseated Peter Mutharika. He defeated incumbent Peter Mutharika with 58.57% of the vote in Tuesday's poll. In February, Malawi's Constitutional Court annulled Mr. Mutharika's victory in the May 2019 election, citing vote tampering. It's the second African nation to annul a presidential election over irregularities after Kenya in 2017. Mr. Chakwera leads a 9-party coalition, the Tons Alliance, and had the backing of former President Joyce Banda, as well as Mr. Chilima, who served as deputy to Mr. Mutharika. Now let's take a closer look at the man who gets to sit at the helm of affairs in Malawi. Lazarus Chakwera is a well-known figure in Malawian politics. He has been active since 2013 at the helm of Pre-Independence Malawi Congress Party, MCP. He ran for president in 2014 and 2019, emerging second both times. Mr. Chakwera was born in the outskirts of Lilongwe City, named after Lazarus in the Bible, who was raised from the dead after 2 two of his elder brothers died in infancy, his parents believed he would leave. He studied theology in Malawi, South Africa, and USA, and worked as a pastor and lecturer at the Assemblies of God School of Theology. Lazarus Chakwera, who hails from Malembo village in the traditional authority Kogoni, is married with 4 children and grandchildren. Well, we have Mercy Malikwa. She's a Malawian journalist joining us from Blantyre City. Hello, Mercy. Thank you for speaking to us on the program.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Do tell us, what's the mood like in Malawi a day after President Chakwera's inauguration?
Supporters of the winning team are up and about in the country's cities celebrating their victory. And the president has also started doing his state duties. Today, he's released a cabinet list, and just this afternoon, he was swearing in some of the cabinet ministers that he has appointed.
Yeah, Mr. Chakwera is not necessarily new to Malawi politics. He's run for president twice, and with his recent victory, could we say he is widely accepted by the people of Malawi?
Looking at the vote, we could say so, because he's amassed 58% of the total votes that was cast. So that's above the 50% plus 1 that was ordered by the court. But if we look at the pattern of voting, we would say there's still a section of Malawians that did not vote for the current president. Basically, in Malawi, most voters vote on regional and tribal patterns. So we would see that there are still some districts that the outgoing president amassed the larger votes.
All right, let's talk about the promises he's made to the people of Malawi. Tell us more about his presidential speech on Sunday, during Sunday's ceremony.
President Lazarus Chakwera's speech was basically on servant leadership and unifying Malawi. He's promised that he is in office to save Malawians. He's promised that his government will work towards giving Malawians what they want, and he's here to unify Malawians. He said that although there are 33% of the voters voted for the outgoing leader, he is here for all Malawians, irrespective of whether they voted for him or they did not vote for him. Basically, I can say that his speech has instilled hope of a unified Malawi that many Malawians have been fighting for in the past months.
All right, Mercy, just before I let you go, Malawi became the second African nation in February to annul a presidential election over irregularities. So what's the reaction coming from Peter Mutharika's camp? Will he be challenging this result or conceding defeat?
The past president has neither hinted of challenging the results, and neither has he conceded the results. A day before the Electoral Commission declared President Lazarus Chakwera as the winner in the polls, Mutharika called for a press briefing. He told members of the press that the election has not gone to the people's wish, and the results that the Electoral Commission was getting do not reflect the people's wish on the ground. And up to now, he has maintained his stance that the vote did not go according to people's wish, and actually he was not there during the swearing-in ceremony. Although he said that when he gets an invite to the inauguration on 6th July, he's going to go. But he's neither conceded and neither has he said that he will challenge the results.
All right, then. Thank you, Mercy Malikwa, the journalist joining us from Blantyre.
Thank you.
Let's move to Burundi now, where newly elected leader Evariste Ndayishimiye has named a new cabinet that includes two officials sanctioned by the US and European Union. The two men were sanctioned for their suspected role in violence and human rights violations during unrest in 2015, when the late President Pierre Nkurunziza pushed for a third term. The cabinet is composed of a prime minister and 15 ministers who all have the task of turning around the country's economy, security, and improving relations with its neighbors, especially Rwanda. 5 women have also been appointed to posts in the ministries of Justice, Labor, Trade and Tourism, Social Affairs and Human Rights, and Communication. Somalia's electoral chief is calling for the parliamentary and presidential elections to be postponed to August 2021. The chairperson of the commission, Halima Ibrahim, says there are issues such as lack of funds, insecurity, flooding and the coronavirus pandemic that had disrupted the Commission's work. The parliamentary election was scheduled for November 2020, while the presidential election was expected to be held in February 2021. They were to be the country's first one-person, one-vote elections for 50 years. Previous elections have been decided by clan elders. However, Somalia's main opposition parties have rejected the proposal to delay the polls. The United Nations says the security situation in Mali is deteriorating as widespread impunity continues to undermine efforts to protect civilians. The UN High Commission for Human Rights reports that 580 civilians have been killed so far this year in the central region. The commissioner is therefore calling on the Malian authorities to establish a prompt, thorough, impartial, and independent investigations into all human rights violations.
Civilians have been killed so far this year in central Mali as a deteriorating security situation and widespread impunity undermine efforts to protect civilians. Militias from the Pearl community, who are primarily herders, were responsible for at least 71 of these incidents, leading to the deaths of 210 people. Those from the Dogon community, who are mainly farmers and hunters, carried out 12 attacks, leaving at least 82 people dead. These attacks across community lines have also been fueled and instrumentalized by groups such as Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, the Islamic State in the Greater Sahara, and the Group to Support Islam and Muslims. They've used the intercommunal violence to recruit members into their ranks. These armed groups have increased their presence in the central region as they continue to be challenged in the north of Mali by national and international armed forces. According to information documented by the Human Rights and Protection Division since the start of the year, these groups have been responsible for 105 human rights abuses in the Mopti region, including 67 killings.
At least 7 patients have been killed in a fire at a hospital in the Egyptian city of Alexandria. 7 members of staff have also been injured. Egyptian media say a short circuit in the air conditioning system at the Bradwari hospital triggered the blaze in an area occupied by people suffering from coronavirus. Other patients at the hospital were evacuated after the area was cordoned off and an investigation has been launched into the fire. You're watching Network Africa on Channels Television. Still ahead on the program. Ghanaian health workers are sure to be elated as President Nana Akufo-Addo announces a tax waiver for the next 3 months. Please stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. We begin our coronavirus coverage with the latest figures from Africa. As the world passes the 10 million mark in COVID-19 cases, Africa accounts for over 383,000. From that figure, over 190,586 are the active confirmed cases. More than 183,000 people have recovered, and the death toll stands at over 9,600. South Africa still has the highest number of cases on the continent with 138,134 cases. It's followed by Egypt with 65,188 and Nigeria with 24,567 cases. Next is Ghana with 17,351, then Algeria, which has seen 13,273. Meanwhile, the countries with the most fatalities are Egypt with 2,789, South Africa with 2,456, Algeria, Sudan, and Nigeria. Ghana's President Nana Akufo-Addo has announced that an incentive package brought in for health workers when coronavirus hit the country will be extended for another 3 months. They will continue enjoying a 50% increase in their basic salaries and will not pay income tax for the months of July, August, and September. The president said in a televised address that the incentives are intended to motivate health workers in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. Ghana has so far confirmed about 17,000 cases and 112 deaths. It has conducted 294,867 tests, one of the highest in the continent. Well, let's get more on this from Roland Walker. He's a Joy News TV correspondent in Accra, Ghana. Hello, Roland. Thank you for speaking to us.
Well, hello, and good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
I know it's closer to evening.
Please help us understand what this extension means for the health workers.
Well, we have to say that the extension ended this month, and ultimately, because it started in the better part of April, May, and June, it would mean that health workers who were earning a certain amount of money, depending on which category you find yourself, you're going to get 50%. And then ultimately, for those who were lower down the clinical side in terms of how they get to interface with coronavirus cases, we paid the lower percentage of some 25. And the reason why we've not had this fully implemented as of yet, even though the figures or the percentages have been designated, is because there was some level of difficulty that the clinicians or the health authorities and then the personnel had with the category of workers who were supposed to be so-called frontline workers. Ideally, a frontline worker is somebody who works on the clinical side and then encounters the cases. Initially, when the cases started trickling in, you would remember from the beginning of March 12, when we had about 22 cases, we've now gotten to a stage where, as you announced, we've had a total of some over 17,000. And ultimately, it will mean that now we're getting cases not from the communities. Initially, we were getting cases that were reported, they would be treated after quarantine, etc. And then there will be contact tracing in the community. So the cases were coming from the communities. Now, the cases have transcended the communities and they are being reported more also in the hospitals or the health facility. It will mean that who initially, at the time when this was announced, the 50% rebate is a frontline worker has changed. So if somebody initially was working at the isolation center, that person is not only now going to be the frontline worker. Now the cases are coming to OPDs, and so it means the various clinicians or the nurses and the doctors association groups need to redefine who becomes a frontline health worker. That is why we've had the need to increase it. The president is doing this to increase the time for the benefit because it is important that all health workers contribute their quota to this. We've had a number of infections so far among health workers. The last time around, we had the announcement that was made that over 84 health workers, including doctors, have been infected. Just about a week and a half ago, a doctor died in Gama's city of Kumasi. It means that more doctors, more nurses are becoming infected, and so it will mean more people needed to sacrifice other health, and that is why this has been done.
All right, President Akufo-Addo says this incentive is to motivate health workers in the country. What is the reaction from health workers? Are they motivated by this?
I would say that they have been motivated because apart from this incentive of the 50%, there's also the subject or the motivation of them not paying the income tax on their earnings, and basically will be your basic. And it depends on how much you were earning. So it started from free if you ended a certain amount of money up to about 25% of earnings. But many of these health workers don't fall in the 25% category. They fall within the smaller figures up to 17%. And so they have been motivated by this, but then they've expressed concern. I have to say that I'm a Ghanaian journalist, but what I pick up on the front is that they've not had enough of the incentives of providing the PPE. Sometimes it gets finished or not supplied adequately, and then it will have to be beefed up. They've also had concerns about how they have to be treated if their colleagues have been infected, and ultimately what needs to be done to ensure that they are also kept safe, especially once they are now reporting many of the cases at the hospitals, which used not to be the case. But nonetheless, I have to say that they are motivated in many respective ways.
All right, then, Roland Walker, Joy News TV correspondent, thank you for bringing us up to speed with what's happening in Ghana. South African firm Cape Biotechnologies is working with the government to manufacture coronavirus test kits that promises rapid results compared to those currently available in the domestic market. President Cyril Ramaphosa recently acknowledged that South Africa is in a severe crunch of testing kits with a long backlog of testing, which has resulted in a spike of confirmed cases.
A shortage of coronavirus test kits has undermined South Africa's early response to the crisis, and a local research firm is stepping up to try to fill the gap. Cape Biotechnologies, which sprung up from the Center for Scientific Industrial Research Lab in 2018, plans to roll out up to 5,000 test kits per day from the end of July, with support from the South African government. The Chief Executive Officer of the company, Mr. Daniel Indima, says the kits would produce results within 2 hours, down from a 4 to 5 hour time frame taken by currently available kits, which are imported.
When we realized that the pandemic would be coming to South Africa, we then looked into our portfolio and we decided to look at how we can respond to the crisis for South African market, because we knew that South Africa and the entire continent basically relies heavily on imports, and we knew that because of the pandemic, our country will struggle to get the test kits. So we said to ourselves that we need to stop doing what we were doing and just work on COVID-19 testing project.
According to the Health Ministry, in May, there was a backlog of more than 96,000 unprocessed specimens awaiting coronavirus tests in South Africa. At 5,000 test kits per day, Cape Bio could meet over a tenth of South Africa's current daily testing rate approximately.
We develop these kits locally using our local biological resources from the biodiversity hotspots. So in the sense that, for the first time the world has access to, products and kits that are sourced from African biological resources.
The World Health Organization has said shortages of test kits was a challenge in Africa. Cape Bio, with its team of 11, mostly scientists, will be supplying the kits to the government, while already seeing demand pouring in from other companies globally.
And that's where we end Network Africa today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Layo Adegoke.